Brooklyn, New York. February 1985. The gym was unusually quiet that afternoon, the kind of silence that settles over a place when something unspoken hangs in the air. Glisson's gym on Front Street had seen its share of legends, fighters who clawed their way up from nothing, men who bled on canvas and called it progress. But on this cold Tuesday, with winterlight filtering weakly through grimy windows, the atmosphere carried a different weight. Something was about to happen. The regulars could feel it in their bones. Mike Tyson was 19 years old. Not yet a household name. Not yet the youngest heavyweight champion the world would ever see. But already, he was becoming something else, something dangerous and inevitable. He moved through the gym with the focused intensity of a predator in tall grass, his thick neck glistening with sweat, his eyes fixed on the heavy bag that swung like a pendulum before him. Each punch landed with a sound that didn't belong in a human space, a deep, reverberating thud that made conversations stop mid-sentence. Cos D'Amato, his trainer and adoptive father figure, watched from the corner with those knowing eyes that had seen everything boxing had to offer. Cos knew what Mike was becoming. He'd molded this kid from the wreckage of a broken childhood in Brownsville, transforming rage into discipline, chaos into calculated violence. But even Cos couldn't have predicted what was about to unfold. At 2:47 p.m., the front door swung open, and the cold February air rushed in with it. His name was Robert the Hammer Tillman. 6'3", 225 pounds of muscle and ego. A light heavyweight contender with 12 wins, 2 losses, and a reputation for having hands as fast as his mouth. Tillman had fought on the undercard of several major bouts, had sparred with former champions, had knocked out men whose names appeared in boxing magazines. He carried himself with the swagger of someone who believed his own press clippings. Behind him trailed 3 members of his entourage, hangers-on who laughed at his jokes and inflated his confidence with every nod of agreement. They moved through Glissons like tourists in a museum, pointing and commenting, their voices too loud for the sacred space where serious men did serious work. Tillman's eyes scanned the room until they landed on Mike Tyson. The heavy bag still swung from Mike's last combination. Sweat dripped from his chin onto the worn canvas floor. He hadn't acknowledged Tillman's entrance, hadn't broken his rhythm or his focus. To Mike, the world outside his training simply didn't exist when he was in the zone. It was one of the things Cos had taught him. Control what you can control. Everything else is noise. But Robert Tillman was about to become very loud noise. He approached with that casual arrogance that only comes from men who've never truly been humbled, his expensive sneakers squeaking on the gym floor. He stopped about 10 feet from where Mike stood, close enough to be heard but far enough to maintain the illusion of respect. "So this is the kid everyone's talking about," Tillman said, his voice carrying across the gym. Several fighters stopped their workouts. The speed bags fell silent. Even the veterans, men who'd seen every kind of showdown imaginable, turned to watch. The terror from Brownsville. Cos D'Amato's little science project. Mike's hands dropped to his sides. He turned slowly, his expression unreadable. Up close, the contrast was stark. Tillman tall and sculpted, a specimen of athletic perfection. Mike compact and coiled, built like something designed to demolish buildings. Where Tillman's face showed smug amusement, Mike's revealed nothing at all. It was the blankness of a shark's eye, the empty gaze of something that operated on pure instinct and violence. "I've been hearing your name a lot lately," Tillman continued, warming to his audience now. His entourage chuckled on cue. "People saying you're the next big thing. The future of heavyweight boxing." He paused for effect, that smile still playing at the corners of his mouth. "I just wanted to see for myself if you're really as good as they say, or if you're just another hyped-up kid who's gonna fold the first time he faces real competition." The air grew thick with anticipation. Cos D'Amato stepped forward from the shadows, his weathered face betraying no emotion. At 76 years old, he'd navigated more boxing politics and gym confrontations than most men experience in 3 lifetimes. He knew where this was heading. More importantly, he knew what Mike was capable of when provoked. "This is a place of work, not theater," Cos said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "If you want to train, you're welcome. If you want to make a spectacle, there's the door." Tillman raised his hands in mock surrender, that infuriating smile never wavering. No disrespect intended, Mr. D'Amato. I actually came here hoping to do some work. I thought maybe the kid and I could do a few rounds of light sparring. Nothing serious. Just professionals helping each other sharpen their skills. His eyes locked onto Mike's. Unless he's not ready for that level of work yet. Time seemed to slow. Everyone in that gym understood what was happening. This wasn't about sparring or training or mutual improvement. This was a challenge, wrapped in the thin veneer of professional courtesy. Tillman had come to expose Mike Tyson, to prove that the whispers and rumors were just hype manufactured by a clever old man and his marketing machine. He wanted to be the one who revealed the truth, that Mike Tyson was just another street kid with heavy hands and no real skill. What Tillman didn't understand, what he couldn't possibly have understood, was that Mike Tyson had been preparing for this moment his entire life. The thing about Mike Tyson that most people never truly grasped was that boxing hadn't saved him from violence. It had given his violence purpose, direction, and terrifying efficiency. In Brownsville, violence had been survival, random and desperate. In Cos D'Amato's gym, violence became art, calculated, precise, and absolutely devastating. Cos looked at Mike, and something passed between them. Not permission, exactly. More like recognition. The old trainer understood that some lessons couldn't be taught with words or demonstrations. Some lessons required blood and humiliation and the sharp sting of reality crashing into delusion. "Get your gear," Mike said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. Tillman's smile widened. "That's what I like to hear. A competitor with heart." The next 15 minutes moved with the ritualistic precision of a ceremony. Mike wrapped his hands with the methodical care Cos had drilled into him, each fold and tuck exactly as it should be. Tillman did the same, though his movements were quicker, more casual, still playing to the small crowd that had gathered. Word had spread through the gym with the speed of wildfire. Training sessions paused. Fighters emerged from the back rooms. Even the teenagers who cleaned the gym and dreamed of their own boxing futures pressed close to the ring. The atmosphere shifted from tension to something darker, something primal. This wasn't going to be light sparring between professionals. Everyone knew it. The veterans who'd seen Mike train knew what happened when that switch flipped inside him, when the polite, soft-spoken teenager disappeared and something ancient and brutal took his place. Tillman climbed through the ropes first, bouncing on his toes, rolling his shoulders, shadowboxing with the flashy combinations that looked impressive but signaled inexperience to those who truly understood the craft. He had reach, speed, and confidence. What he didn't have was wisdom. Mike entered the ring last, and the difference was immediate. He didn't bounce or showboat or perform for the crowd. He simply stood in his corner, perfectly still, his eyes locked on Tillman with an intensity that made several onlookers unconsciously step back. It was the stillness of a coiled spring, of compressed energy waiting for release. Cos climbed onto the ring apron, his old hands gripping the ropes. "Remember what I taught you," he said to Mike, his voice low enough that only his fighter could hear. "See everything. React to nothing. Let him show you who he is, then take it from him." Mike nodded once. From across the ring, Tillman called out, still working that angle, still playing the confident showman. "Don't worry, kid. I'll go easy on you. We're just dancing here, right? Just a little friendly work." Nobody was fooled. One of Glisson's regulars, a retired middleweight named Jimmy Costello, volunteered to referee. He climbed through the ropes with visible reluctance, understanding that he was about to witness something that would be talked about for years. Jimmy had been around boxing long enough to recognize the difference between a sparring session and an execution. "Keep it clean," Jimmy said, though his voice lacked conviction. "This is just sparring. No headhunting, no cheap shots. We clear." Both fighters nodded, but their eyes told different stories. Tillman's gaze held anticipation and barely concealed excitement. Mike's revealed nothing at all, that same shark-like emptiness, the void where mercy should have lived. "Touch gloves and come out working," Jimmy said, stepping back. They moved to the center of the ring. Tillman extended his gloves with that same cocky smile, confidence radiating from every inch of his frame. Mike touched gloves without expression, without emotion, without any indication of what was about to happen. Then he returned to his corner and everything changed. The first seconds of the round unfolded with deceptive normalcy. Tillman circled to his left, keeping his long jab between himself and Mike, measuring distance, establishing his range. He was doing exactly what a taller fighter should do against a shorter opponent, using his reach advantage, staying on the outside, making Mike come to him. Mike moved forward with that distinctive bobbing, weaving motion that Koz had refined through thousands of hours of drilling. His head moved in figure eights, making him a difficult target, always shifting, never static. To the untrained eye, it looked almost comical, this compact young man with his exaggerated head movement, bouncing slightly on his toes. But the veterans watching knew better. They'd seen this before. They knew what it meant. Tillman flicked out a jab. Mike's head moved left, and the punch passed through empty air. Another jab. Quicker this time. Mike slipped right, closing distance by half a step. Tillman's confidence remained intact. He'd missed 2 jabs, but that was normal. That was boxing. Punches missed. It didn't mean anything. Except it meant everything. The air grew thick with something unspoken. Mike threw his first punch 30 seconds into the round, a feinting jab that barely extended, just testing Tillman's reaction. The taller fighter pulled back slightly, his defense solid, his form textbook. He countered with a 1-2 combination that Mike deflected with his gloves, the punches landing but without power, just rangefinders, professional work. That all you got? Tillman said, the words coming out between breaths. Come on, legend. Show me something. It was the worst mistake of his boxing career. Mike's expression didn't change. His breathing remained steady. But something shifted in his body language, a barely perceptible tightening of his shoulders, a slight lowering of his center of gravity. To those who knew him, it was like watching a bomb receive its detonation signal. He closed the distance with 3 quick steps, his head moving in that hypnotic figure-8 pattern. Tillman threw a jab to keep him back, but Mike had already slipped beneath it, suddenly inside Tillman's long reach, suddenly in the pocket where his compact, muscular frame became a devastating advantage. The first real punch was a left hook to the body that landed just below Tillman's ribcage with a sound like a baseball bat hitting a side of beef. The bigger fighter's eyes widened, not from pain exactly, but from shock. From the sudden realization that he'd miscalculated something fundamental about the physics of power. Before he could process that information or adjust his defense, Mike threw the right uppercut. Every eye in the room turned. It traveled less than 8 inches, launched from somewhere near Mike's waist, and it landed on the point of Tillman's chin with surgical precision. The sound was distinct, sharp, the specific crack of bone meeting bone through the thin padding of a boxing glove. Tillman's head snapped back with whiplash violence, his mouthpiece flying from between his lips in a spray of saliva that caught the afternoon light. His legs didn't immediately fail him. That's the strange thing about being knocked unconscious while standing. There's often a delay, a moment where the body hasn't yet received the message from the brain that consciousness has departed. Robert the Hammer Tillman stood frozen for perhaps 1 full second, his eyes rolled back, his arms still raised in a defensive position that no longer served any purpose. Then gravity reasserted itself. He fell backward, his tall frame toppling like a demolished building, and he hit the canvas with an impact that shook the ring. His entourage rushed forward, their expressions transformed from amusement to horror. Jimmy Costello dropped to his knees beside the fallen fighter, waving frantically for the gym's cut man. Silence consumed the room. Mike Tyson stood in the center of the ring, his chest rising and falling with steady breaths, his gloves still raised in perfect defensive position. He wasn't celebrating. He wasn't showboating or talking trash or playing to the crowd. He simply stood there, waiting to see if Tillman would rise, ready to continue if necessary. The entire confrontation had lasted 93 seconds. Koz D'Amato's face betrayed no surprise, no satisfaction, no emotion beyond a slight nod of acknowledgement. This was what he'd built, what he'd known was possible from the moment he'd first seen that angry kid from Brownsville. This was the weapon he'd been forging in the fire of discipline and technique and psychological warfare. Tillman regained consciousness after approximately 20 seconds, his eyes fluttering open to find himself staring at the gym's water-stained ceiling. Confusion clouded his features, the universal expression of someone who's lost time, who can't quite reconcile their last clear memory with their current situation. His crew helped him sit up, their voices urgent and concerned, asking if he was okay, if he knew where he was. When his vision finally focused, when the fog cleared enough for him to understand what had happened, Robert Tillman's eyes found Mike Tyson across the ring. The younger fighter had returned to his corner, where Cos was removing his gloves with the same methodical care used to put them on. Mike's expression remained neutral, unchanged, as if he'd just finished a routine training drill rather than rendering a professional boxer unconscious with a single punch. The gym remained silent, but it was a different kind of silence now. Not anticipation or tension, but awe. The kind of silence that follows a natural disaster or a profound revelation. Everyone present understood they'd witnessed something significant, something that would be discussed and debated and mythologized in the years to come. One of the old-timers, a cornerman who'd worked with Patterson and Marciano in their primes, spoke just loud enough to be heard in the quiet. "Jesus Christ," he whispered. "That's not a boxer. That's a destroyer." What happened in those 93 seconds wasn't just a sparring session gone wrong or a fighter getting caught with a lucky punch. It was the physical manifestation of two different philosophies colliding, and one being absolutely obliterated by the other. Robert Tillman had approached that ring with the confidence of conventional excellence. He'd trained hard, fought professionally, accumulated victories against respectable opposition. He understood boxing as a sport, as a competition between athletes of comparable skill where physical advantages like height and reach should determine outcomes. In his worldview, Mike Tyson was just another opponent. Shorter, less experienced, overhyped. What Tillman didn't understand was that Mike Tyson didn't think of boxing as a sport. To Mike, the ring was just a regulated version of the survival mechanisms he'd developed in Brownsville, where violence was currency and hesitation meant victimization. Cos D'Amato had taken that raw, dangerous energy and given it focus, technique, and a philosophical framework. He'd taught Mike that true power came not from physical strength but from psychological dominance, from making opponents question themselves before the fight ever began. That single uppercut contained everything Cos had taught and everything Mike had survived. It was biomechanics perfected through countless repetitions. It was timing refined through thousands of hours of mitt work. It was power generated not from arm strength but from the explosive rotation of hips and the synchronized contraction of every muscle in Mike's compact frame. But more than that, it was inevitability. It was the manifestation of an absolute belief in one's own superiority that transcended confidence and entered the realm of certainty. Time seemed to slow. In the aftermath, as Tillman's crew helped him from the ring and into a chair near the gym's office, the reactions from the assembled fighters told their own story. The younger boxers looked at Mike with a mixture of fear and admiration, suddenly understanding that they were in the presence of something unprecedented. The veterans, men who'd seen Frazier and Ali and Foreman in their primes, exchanged knowing glances that communicated what words couldn't. They'd just witnessed the emergence of something special, something historic. Mike finished unwrapping his hands in his corner, his movements still methodical, still controlled. When he finally stepped out of the ring, several fighters approached to offer congratulations or acknowledgement, but he brushed past them with barely a nod. The confrontation hadn't elevated him in his own eyes because he'd never doubted the outcome. This was simply confirmation of what he already knew. Cos met him near the heavy bags, away from the crowd that had gathered around the still-dazed Tillman. The old trainer placed a hand on Mike's shoulder, and for a moment, neither spoke. There was an understanding between them that transcended language, a connection forged in countless hours of training and preparation for precisely these kinds of moments. "You stayed disciplined," Cos said finally. "You waited for him to give you the opening, then you took it." "That's exactly right." Mike nodded, but his eyes had already moved past the moment. He was thinking about the next workout, the next opponent, the next level he needed to reach. One of the things that made him dangerous was his inability to be satisfied, his constant hunger for improvement. Knocking out Robert Tillman meant nothing if it didn't move him closer to his ultimate goal, becoming the youngest heavyweight champion in boxing history. Across the gym, Tillman had recovered enough to stand, though his legs still looked uncertain beneath him. His entourage hovered nervously, suggesting he should go to the hospital to get checked out, that maybe he'd suffered a concussion. But Tillman waved them off, his pride wounded far more severely than his body. The outcome and immediate reaction rippled through the boxing world. Before he left Glisson's gym that day, Robert "the Hammer" Tillman did something that surprised everyone present. He walked across the gym to where Mike stood with Cos, his gait still slightly unsteady, his face already beginning to swell where the uppercut had landed. The conversation around him died as people registered what was happening. He extended his hand. Mike looked at it for a moment, then accepted the gesture. They shook briefly, a moment of respect between fighters that transcended the violence they just shared. "I was wrong," Tillman said, his voice quiet enough that only Mike and Cos and a few nearby fighters could hear. "I came here thinking you were hype. I was wrong." He paused, touching his swollen jaw gingerly. "You're the real thing, kid. No doubt about it." Mike nodded once, accepting the acknowledgement without arrogance or false modesty. "You came to test yourself," he said. "Nothing wrong with that." Tillman managed a pained smile. "Next time I'll just take your word for it." He turned to leave, then paused. "Good luck, Mike. I think you're going to need bigger challenges than guys like me." It was the most gracious defeat anyone in that gym had witnessed in years. The story of what happened at Glisson's gym that February afternoon in 1985 didn't make the newspapers. There were no cameras present to capture the knockout, no journalists to write breathless accounts of the 93-second destruction. In the age before smartphones and social media, moments like these existed only in the memories of those present and in the stories they told afterward. But the absence of documentation didn't diminish the impact. If anything, it enhanced it. Within days, the story spread through the interconnected network of boxing gyms in New York, each retelling adding its own embellishments while preserving the essential truth. Mike Tyson had rendered a legitimate professional fighter unconscious with a single punch in sparring. The details varied depending on who was telling the story. Some said it was 3 punches. Some said Tillman was out for 5 minutes. Some claimed Cos had tried to stop the sparring before it started because he knew what would happen. But everyone agreed on the core facts. Robert Tillman had walked into Glisson's to expose Mike Tyson as overhyped. And he'd left on shaky legs, his confidence shattered, his illusions destroyed. For Mike, the encounter became another data point in his psychological warfare arsenal. Cos had taught him that boxing was as much about intimidation as technique, that making opponents doubt themselves before the opening bell was worth more than any physical advantage. Stories like the Tillman sparring session served a purpose beyond bragging rights. They planted seeds of fear in the minds of future opponents. They created an aura of invincibility that became a weapon in itself. What that moment revealed about Mike Tyson was something deeper than just physical prowess. It showed his absolute certainty in his own abilities, his refusal to be intimidated by reputation or size or conventional wisdom. Where other fighters might have felt pressure or nervousness facing an older, more experienced opponent, Mike felt only the calm focus of someone executing a plan they'd rehearsed 1,000 times. More significantly, it revealed his control. The knockout could have been more brutal. Mike could have followed up with additional punches as Tillman fell, could have showboated or talked trash or humiliated his opponent beyond the physical defeat. But he didn't. He threw the precise amount of force necessary to end the confrontation, then immediately returned to a defensive position, ready but not aggressive. It was violence, yes, but violence with parameters. Destruction with discipline. The lesson learned by Robert Tillman extended beyond the simple acknowledgement that he'd been wrong about Mike's abilities. He learned something fundamental about levels in boxing, that there are fighters, good fighters, great fighters, and then occasionally, rarely, something else entirely. Something that transcends the normal categories and operates on a different plane of ability. He'd encountered one of those rare specimens, and the experience humbled him in ways that altered his career trajectory. Tillman continued boxing for another 3 years, compiling a respectable record and winning a regional title. But he never again approached a sparring session with the casual arrogance he'd displayed that February afternoon. He treated every opponent with caution and respect, understanding that underestimating someone based on age or size or reputation could result in consequences far worse than a bruised ego. Why does this moment remain largely untold, hidden from the official narrative of Mike Tyson's rise to greatness? Several reasons converge. First, sparring sessions have an unwritten code in boxing. What happens in training stays in training. The gym is where fighters make mistakes, test new techniques, and occasionally get dominated by someone they're not ready for. Broadcasting those moments breaks the sacred trust of the training environment. Mike and Cos honored that code, as did most people present that day. Second, the story didn't serve the carefully constructed marketing narrative being built around Mike Tyson. His promoters and managers wanted to control his public image, to introduce him to the world through sanctioned bouts and official records. An unsanctioned sparring session knockout didn't fit the promotional roadmap, so it was simply never highlighted or discussed in public forums. Third, and perhaps most significantly, Mike Tyson didn't need to tell the story. He wasn't insecure about his abilities or desperate for validation. The knockout meant something to him in the moment, confirmation that his training was working, that the techniques Cos drilled into him translated to real confrontations. But once that confirmation was received, he moved on. His focus was always forward, always on the next challenge, the next level. And that's how legends are forged in moments the world never sees. The public eventually knew Mike Tyson as the youngest heavyweight champion in history, as the intimidating destroyer who walked to the ring without a robe, who dismantled opponents with surgical precision and frightening power. They saw the finished product, the culmination of years of training and preparation and psychological conditioning. But they didn't see the moments like that February afternoon at Glisson's, the private confrontations where the legend was actually forged, where talk met reality and reality won decisively. They didn't see Cos D'Amato's quiet satisfaction as he watched his protégé dismantle a cocky professional in 93 seconds. They didn't see the faces of veteran fighters who recognized they were witnessing history in real time. Those moments remain hidden, preserved in the memories of a select few who understood what they'd witnessed. And in some ways, that secrecy made them more powerful. The story of Robert Tillman's humiliation spread through whispers and second-hand accounts, growing in the telling but always maintaining its essential truth. Mike Tyson was different. Mike Tyson was inevitable. Mike Tyson was exactly as dangerous as Cos D'Amato claimed. By the time Mike entered the professional ranks later that year, that February sparring session had become part of his mythology, one thread in a tapestry of intimidation that he wore like armor. Opponents heard the stories, some true, some exaggerated, all frightening, and they entered the ring already half defeated, already questioning whether they had what it took to face this compact destroyer from Brownsville. In November 1986, less than 2 years after the Tillman encounter, Mike Tyson knocked out Trevor Berbick in the second round to become, at 20 years old, the youngest heavyweight champion in boxing history. He achieved the goal that Cos D'Amato had set for him, the destination they'd been traveling toward through every morning roadwork session, every afternoon of mitt work, every sparring session where Mike learned what he was truly capable of. The world celebrated the achievement as if it were a surprise, as if this somehow defied expectations. But for those who'd been present at Glisson's gym that quiet February afternoon in 1985, it was no surprise at all. They'd already seen the future. They'd already witnessed what Mike Tyson became when challenged, when disrespected, when given permission to show his true capabilities. The gym war that made Mike Tyson a legend happened in private, witnessed by maybe 40 people, preserved only in memory and whispered stories. But its impact rippled through the boxing world, creating waves that eventually became a tsunami. It taught Mike that his training worked, that his abilities were real, that the path Cos had set him on led where it promised. It taught Robert Tillman and everyone else present that exceptional isn't enough when faced with transcendent. And it added another layer to the psychological armor that Mike wore into every subsequent fight, the certainty that he was exactly as dangerous as people feared. In the end, perhaps that's why this story remains untold in the official histories. Because the official histories document achievements, title fights, championship belts, knockout records. But this was something else. This was a glimpse into the process of becoming, the private moment when potential crystallized into reality, when a teenager from Brownsville proved to himself and a small audience that he was ready for whatever came next. And that's how legends are forged in moments the world never sees.